What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and we're diving into another 10th edition faction reveal article, this time for Thousand Suns. Now, this is one that I've been waiting for with bated breath for a long time, since all of the psychic powers in the game have been entirely reworked. Seeing how psychic factions like Thousand Suns and Grey Knights will operate is going to be hugely transformative to how the game looks in its 10th edition. And let's dive in to what this faction does. First off, we see a return of their Cabalistic Rituals in their army ability, Cabal of Sorcerers. This gives you a number of Cabal points equal to the number indicated in the Cabal of Sorcerers ability on many of the units in the Thousand Suns army. This means you don't have to remember which sorcerers grant how many points, it just says so on their datasheet, which is great. These Cabal points can be spent on rituals and reset every battle round, and the rituals have pretty wild effects. A lot of psychic powers that we remember from previous versions of the Thousand Suns book have been rolled into these ritualistic effects. So instead of buffing your psychic powers, these are basically replacing your psychic powers. The first one is Weaver of Fates. This gives you a floating saving throw reroll to a unit within 18 inches. You can use each ritual only once per phase, so you only get this once, but you can use it in multiple phases, in enemy shooting, fight, and then even in your fight phase, potentially, if you're taking enemy attacks. Temporal Surge is a return of the double move, however, it no longer allows you to charge, and we do see Thousand Suns units being a little bit slower, so this isn't quite as powerful as it was previously, but I do think that Thousand Suns are most likely going to be the Flamer Matters faction. They're going to be throwing Warpflamers down your throat as quickly as they can, so being able to double move with this ability is huge. Echoes from the Warp gives you a 0 CP stratagem that you can use even if you've already used that stratagem in the same phase. You use this at the start of the phase, and it only affects the Psykers unit, so the effects are pretty limited, but it basically gives you a Rites of Battle on demand from the Space Marine reveal. One thing that's kind of noted by the article is that teleporting may be a stratagem, so we may see the return of Sorceress Facade as a stratagem specifically, and this would potentially allow you to do that multiple times. Doom Bolt is actually kind of nuts. While the rest of the army isn't going to be dealing mortal wounds in the psychic phase like we saw previously, doing smite now, Doombolt is basically the only source of mortal wounds that we get from a psychic effect. However, it does do a ton of damage. It allows you to choose an enemy unit within 18 inches invisible to the Psyker performing the ritual. You roll a d6, on a 1 they take d3 mortal wounds, on a 2+, they take d3 plus 3, and if you're lucky enough to roll a 6, they take d3 plus 6 instead. Now importantly, there's no targeting restrictions on this beyond just being within 18 inches invisible. So you can shoot characters that are lone operatives, you can shoot units that would normally be untargetable from ranged attacks, like units being protected by Bellicor. All of this is insane, and there are ways to increase the range of the ability, so your opponent can't really leave their characters out in the open without potentially getting them nuked. Now, as far as we know, there is no way to repeat the same cast multiple times, and it is only in your shooting phase, so you probably only get one Doom Bolt per turn. So the number of mortal wounds is going to be a lot less than in the 9th edition codex, but this is still an incredibly powerful ability. Last and certainly not least, for 9 Cabal points, we have Twist of Fate, which removes armor saving throws for an enemy unit within 18 inches and visible to the Psyker for the remainder of any phase. Importantly, this can be used both in your turn and your opponent's turn, so if you are threatening Overwatch on your opponent, you can potentially Twist of Fate them in their turn to do additional damage. However, it is at the start of the phase, so they know that it's active on them. It is interesting that this is armor saving throws, not invulnerable saving throws, but given the fact that I think we're going to have a high volume of mid-AP weapons in the Thousand Suns faction, removing armor saves from high armor save units like enemy Terminators is going to be a huge deal. It's going to force them onto their invulnerable saves and basically give you the equivalent of having AP2 or AP3 on your entire army. Now, some of the weapons that can benefit from these effects are your psychic weapons, and these get a special bonus from the Cult of Magic Detachment rule. Now, so far, there have not been that many psychic weapons spoiled for this faction at all, so how powerful this ability is, we actually just don't know. It looks like most of the units in the game will have a single psychic attack that will attack 1 or 2 times, and a lot of these specialist melee weapons will be psychic keyworded, so those will all benefit from this. But what we haven't seen is a high volume unit that has a lot of psychic attacks that would really get the benefit. So generally, this doesn't really seem like that powerful of an ability, but it may be that there are units that we're not seeing that will get a huge benefit from it. This allows you in your command phase to select one ability to grant to all of the psychic weapons in your army until your next command phase, either lethal hits, sustained hits, or devastating wounds. All of these abilities are nice to have, but again, We just don't know exactly what they affect. So based on this article, it looks like a not very powerful ability at all, but there might be some datasheets we haven't seen yet. Speaking of datasheets, we do have a couple spoiled. The first one being Ahriman. This guy has traditionally been a support caster and kind of retains his role as a support character. He can join a unit with the leader ability and grants that unit +1 to wound with all of their attacks, both ranged and melee. Definitely, I think that we're angling this guy to like sit inside a big brick of Scarab Occult Terminators or something and just be absolutely devastating in the shooting phase. But as we'll talk about, there's also some room for him in Rubric Marine squads to make them absolutely lethal. He also comes with the Arch-Sorcerer of Tzeentch ability, which allows you to once per game use a ritual for free. Unlike free stratagem abilities, this doesn't override the normal restrictions on rituals, so he still can only use a ritual if it hasn't been done that phase, but it gives you a free Twist of Fate, for example, or a free Doom Bolt whenever you want without having to burn all your ritual points for it. He himself gives you 3 Cabalistic Ritual points, and he comes with a pretty normalized stat line. He's 6-inch move, T4 with a 3+ save and 5 wounds, a normal leadership of 6, and 1 objective control. Although this apparently is just Ahriman on foot, we don't see him on the disc. We don't know what the disc will do to his profile if he has it. In terms of ranged attacks, he has an Inferno Bolt Pistol, which is kind of whatever, and then also a Psychic Stalk. This is a very uninspiring ranged attack. It's an 18-inch range weapon, shoots 1 time, hits on 2s, at strength 6, AP 1 for d6 damage with both the precision and psychic characteristics. So he is going to get the benefit of those special Cult of Magic buffs, but at only 1 attack at strength 6, it's maybe okay at clipping out low wound enemy characters, things like, I don't know, platoon officers or something, but against any hardier characters, it's going to have a tough time penetrating, especially if they have good armor. Like I said, Ahriman's never been like the super caster guy, but if this is what we can expect from the character psychic attacks, I'm not that excited about it. His Black Staff of Ahriman returns, however, and it's pretty solid psychic weapon, so this will also get the benefit of those abilities in close combat. It attacks 5 times, hitting on 2s at strength 7, AP 1 for 3 damage. Moving on, though, we can talk about a unit that he may be leading, because we do have the datasheet for Rubric Marines, and these things have gotten a total overhaul. We're no longer seeing them as defensively oriented as they were. While they do have a built-in 5+ invulnerable save, they've lost all as dust, so they don't have the same level of armor save stacking that they had available previously. That said, they are much more offensively oriented, and these things are going to deal insane damage. They come in at a pretty mediocre stat line of 5-inch movement. We do see the old school low movement value for Rubric Marines return. At toughness 4 with a 3+ save, 2 wounds, a 6+ leadership, and objective control of 2, as we can expect from battle line infantry. They have the Cabal of Sorcerers 1 ability on the sorcerer itself, and he himself is a psyker, meaning that if the unit attempts to perform ritual, all of the ranges are measured from the sorcerer himself. The unit, however, also has the Bringers of Change ability. This is basically the ability we've seen from Legionnaires and Gene Stealers, where they get wound rerolls in some situations. However, theirs affects ranged attacks, not melee, like the other varieties we've seen, making it dramatically more powerful. Each time they make a ranged attack, they get to reroll wound rolls of 1, and in addition, if they're targeting an enemy unit that is on an objective, you get full rerolls to wound. Again, this is a unit that has a high volume of low to mid-strength attacks, so wound rerolls dramatically impact them. This makes this unit incredibly good at killing a wide variety of targets, from high volume destroying infantry to rerolling into killing heavy armor and tanks. Especially if they are equipped with Ahriman and he's attached to the unit, they're going to be wounding most of the game on 4s, maybe 5s at worst, with full rerolls if even a tiny iota of the target is within range of an objective marker. Especially because they have a free Twist of Fate in the bank if you have Ahriman with them. All of these weapons can ignore an armor saves and do insane damage. Speaking of armor saves, if they have an Icon of Flame equipped, they can also get a rending effect, critical wounds giving +1 AP. Now, in terms of those ranged weapons, they have seen a couple of buffs. Inferno Bolt Guns are now just a 2-shot weapon at strength 4, AP 1 at 24-inch range, so they don't have to get within half range in order to get their double attack. Plasma Pistols are back at the Plasma Pistol profile that I think we have come to expect, or the Sorcerer can take a Warpflame Pistol. The Warpflamers retain D6 shots and an AP value of 1, but are gaining Ignore Cover. So while their AP value is lower, a lot of times it's going to feel the same because your opponent's not getting the benefit of light cover that they're standing in. They are Torrent weapons, so they automatically hit, and this makes them incredibly effective both in your turn and firing Overwatch, since they will be able to hit automatically rather than hitting on 6s like normal Overwatch. Sorcerer can use his Warp Smite. This is a pistol psychic weapon, so it's usable in melee. It is anti-infantry 4+ with devastating wounds, basically the same characteristics that we see from a combi weapon. So on a 4+, it's going to automatically wound an infantry model and turn into a critical wound, which then turns into a devastating wound, so inflicts a mortal wound. This is a psychic weapon with 2 attacks, hitting on 3s and strength 4, AP 3. 1 damage, so we'll get the benefits of those other effects that we give it from the Cult of Magic abilities. Now, otherwise, the rest of the unit can either take those Warpflamers or Soul Reaper cannons. The Soul Reaper cannon is a 6-shot weapon hitting on 3s at strength 6, AP 1 with 24 inches. It does have the devastating wounds effect as well, so it uses that assault cannon special ability to inflict mortal wounds on critical wound rolls. Now, an important thing to note here, I think, is that these flamers are no longer assault weapons. I've been talking about them a lot, and I do think that Tauren weapons are really powerful in this edition. They are not assault weapons anymore, so you can't advance and shoot them. We can double move and shoot with the Ritual for Rubric Marine squads, and if we do have a way to teleport them, that's going to be super powerful, but they are a little bit slower than they would have been previously. Now, speaking of ranged weapons, we also see a big glow up for the Mutalith Vortex Beast. I know a lot of people were excited to see this thing because it has been varying degrees of not very good in previous editions, so seeing how they fix it is exciting. And it does look like it has gotten a huge glow up, with a brand new weapon profile for its Warp Vortex, not working like a bizarre pseudo-psychic power. Instead, it's a modal weapon. It either fires a blast, beam, or torrent attack. The blast is of course, blast weapon, firing D6 plus 3 shots at 24 inches, hitting on 3s at strength 9, AP 2, 2 damage. Very good at killing enemy Space Marine profiles. The beam weapon has the devastating wounds characteristic and fires 1 attack, hitting on a 3 at strength 18, AP 4, D6 plus 6 damage. Just a big old laser destroyer for your tank blowing up pleasure. And the torrent attack is a torrent that ignores cover, normal flamer stuff at a 12-inch range, firing 2d6 shots at strength 6, AP 1. All of these profiles are great, but the Mutalith Vortex piece is also being pushed as a support piece. Not only can it do a bunch of damage in the shooting phase, but it also impacts your rituals. Now it has the Immaterial Flare ability, which gives Thousand Sons Psyker units double range when resolving rituals within 6 inches. Importantly, this is measured to the unit, not the Psyker itself, so if you have a Rubric Marine squad, you can actually chain the squad out and have the Rubric Marines within 6 and have a Sorcerer even farther away benefit from the extended range. This can give things like Doombolt a 36-inch range, which makes it incredibly hard to hide from. Last and maybe least, we also get a stratagem for the faction. This is Psychic Dominion, and it is a very targeted defensive stratagem, specifically against enemy psychic attacks. It gives you a 4+ feel no pain against those attacks and forces all enemy psychic weapons targeting that unit to get the hazardous ability, forcing them to roll after attacking, and on a 1, they die, or if they're a character, they take mortal wounds. Now, in a lot of armies, this is going to be pretty funny because they won't necessarily have hazardous weapons to shrug their hazardous test failures off onto in their units with Psychers. There's also, I think, going to be factions like Grey Knights potentially that have a lot of psychic keyworded attacks. If we see that the force weapons in the game are psychic keyworded innately, then getting a 4+ feel no pain and forcing hazardous on those is going to be disgusting in matchups like that. If you have 10 Grey Knights coming into you, you're forcing 10 hazardous tests on your opponent and ignoring half the damage they're dealing to you, which is a lot. That said, it is incredibly narrow in its use case. It only works against psychic attacks, and we haven't seen that many of those in the game, so we'll have to see what the full meta looks like before we can really analyze a stratagem like this. Now, in the developers notes section of the article, there are a couple other tidbits. They talk about Magnus's ranged attack getting some love, and they keep talking about this ranged attack, but they haven't put their money where their mouth is and actually shown it to us. So while they keep harping on the fact that it's incredibly powerful and one of the strongest single profiles in the game, we don't know what it does still, so who knows? I imagine it's a modal attack, and he'll have a high volume shot that's going to get a huge buff from those Cult of Magic buffs that you can grant your army, just like the Mutalith Vortex Beast, so I hope that that's the case. In addition, they also mentioned that Cabal of Sorcerers will allow you to use teleportation. I imagine this means that teleportation is a stratagem that you're going to be able to get for free thanks to the Cabalistic Rituals. So you could potentially be spending CP and Cabal points to teleport 2 units across the table to really inflict massive damage to your opponent. And as we talked about many times before, getting up close and personal with your opponent with torrent weapons is huge, because then they're suddenly going to have to operate their whole turn with the knowledge of the fact that you could shoot them with auto-hitting weapons with rerolls and wound bonuses if they ever try to move while being in range of those attacks. So far, I do think that Thousand Sons look incredibly strong. I'm not sure how their psychic effects are going to do, because we haven't seen that many psychic attacks attacks from the faction so far, but their ability to jump out into the open and absolutely obliterate people looks like it's going to be unparalleled. Their short-range damage output looks absolutely ludicrous, and I'm happy to see it. So let me know down in the comment section what you think about this article and the Thousand Suns army. Big thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video, and thanks as well for supporting the channel, either over on Patreon at patreon.com/TacticalTortoise, YouTube channel members, Twitch subscribers. All you people who do that stuff are great, and I love you. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.